Okay. So, hello everyone. Today's installment of Paths to Publishing is going to be a little bit different. It's our final episode, which is bittersweet. And I'm also joined by Pine Reads writer Jackie Balbastro, who is going to be my co-host today as we interview aspiring author and Pine Reads Assistant Director Wendy Waltrip. And since we got the chance to chat with established agents and authors over the course of this series, we thought that speaking with someone at the beginning of their publishing journey would just be a great way to end. So, without further ado, Wendy, Jackie and I both know that you've been writing for pretty much your entire life. But for those watching who don't know your story, when did you first fall in love with writing, and how did you know that you wanted to pursue writing as a career?
Okay, so I basically always loved writing. I was always telling stories. I can have characters make anything into a character. Like I would play with erasers and turn them into like characters and then tell stories with them. When I would play with dolls or things like that, it always ended up like action adventure-y. So I've always told stories, and I've always loved writing them down as well. But I kind of got started, I guess, with a story that I wrote when I was 8 years old called The Pink Elephant. And I have it with me because I save everything. So there it is with my horrible drawing of an elephant. Um, and that story was basically the first story that I ever finished. So it's about an elephant who's born pink because her parents are red and white, very realistic here. And she's bullied because of that. I was also going through bullying at the time, so I think that was kind of my way of coping with it. But and then she gets help from a fairy godmother named Sarah, and she learns to confront her bullies. And so it was very short. Obviously, it was like I think like 10 notebook pages, but it was a really fun opportunity for me. And I remember just being so excited when I finished it. We were traveling and visiting some friends, and we got there to their house and I was almost done, and I went over to their counter and just like scribbled down the ending, and then just got so excited and went and showed them my finished product and read it out loud to them. So that was basically the first time that I finished a story, and that's kind of where things really got started, where I just knew I had a passion for it. And then The Keys of Power was my next story that I finished, and that one was a lot longer. I thought I was going to be the youngest published author ever at that point. I was trying to publish it by 11, which didn't happen, but it was a great goal. But that story was about maybe 50 pages typed. So it was definitely longer. And that one was about like two kids who end up having powers that they're given to them because they wear these key necklaces. And so then it's about this like bad guy who's going after them and trying to steal their necklaces so he can get their powers instead. And of course, it involved kidnapping and like brainwashing and lots of fun stuff. But so that one was my first, I called it a book. It was not a book, but first longer story. And then was when I really started going into books. So on my 12th birthday, we had a journal writing entry in my sixth grade language arts class. And the entry was a free write that day. And so I was like, I don't know what to write. I want to write something creative here. And so I turned to the guy who was sitting in front of me and was like, hey, give me an idea for what to write. And so he was like, well, write a story about me. So I was like, okay, sounds great. So I did. And I have that as well, which you can't really see, but it's here and you can kind of see the date up there. But I did. I wrote the story about him, and the beginning of that was what ended up becoming my first novel called In the Fortress. And it's about two kids with powers. Again, there's a definite theme here, continuing on still, even currently. And they basically have to save the world. So that was kind of just where I got started from that. That book ended up being like 243 pages, I think, handwritten, which is here, and is an absolute mess, but you can kind of see all these pages here. So that's really where it all began, was just writing that book. From that point on, I knew that I wanted to pursue writing as a career, and I wrote 7 more books by the time I was 16. So at that point, I'd written 8 books. And I guess to just kind of summarize them briefly, the first 5, including In the Fortress, those are all in the same series about the 2 siblings with powers who have to save the world multiple times with their friends, and it culminates in like a big war between pterodactyls and these monsters I created. Yeah, it's a very, very involved plot involving pterodactyls a lot because that was an idea from a friend of mine when I was trying to figure out what to write. I have now learned not necessarily to get ideas from friends because they kind of go weird, but it was fun to do that. And that one was my longest to date until like a week ago when I finished my current one. And the last book in that series, the 5th one, it was like 520 pages. So pretty big, pretty thick book, but definitely a lot of fun. So those are all in the Chronicles of Power. And then I wrote a standalone called Secrets, which is about a girl also with powers who has to go to this like institution for kids with powers. And then she discovers this plot and she has to kind of like save them all from this plot. So it was a lot of fun. That one involved branding, whipping, lots of fun things like that. So very action adventure with that. And then I did a trilogy called The Maplewood Mysteries, which mysteries, by the way, are super hard to write, but fun. So I wrote the first 2 for that, Charred Memories and 2 Weeks of Terror. And it's basically just these 2 siblings who are trying to solve these mysteries and discovering things about the first one. They're just solving this mystery of a fire that happened 13 years ago. And getting themselves in a lot of trouble while they're at it because they're all very action adventure. So lots of fun, but lots of writing, and that all happened before I was 16. Um, so I was writing books like in 9 months. I think the first one I wrote in 3 months. I was very fast with all of that then. And then now I just finished my last one, which I'll talk about later, but that one ended up being 586 pages, and it's called Stealing Time. And that one took 3 years. So definitely a big difference between 9 months and 3 years. But yeah, I basically just always knew I wanted to pursue writing as a career. I think in kindergarten, I said I wanted to be a vet, but after that, it pretty much that never, once I discovered you had to like put dogs down, I didn't want to do that job anymore. So then it basically was writing from that point forward. And I like, there are things that I can look back on, like we had career days and things like that in middle school. Like in 8th grade, we got to talk to somebody who was in our chosen career at that point, which I wonder how many of those are things that people are still interested in. But for me, it was because I got to talk to an author for that and learned a whole lot about querying at that point, which is what really got me going on querying later. And then like there's a photo, a really cute photo we have from sophomore year of high school, where somebody took a picture of me holding up a sign that says, I want to be a best-selling author when I grow up. So definitely always wanted to be an author.
So my first question for you, seeing as you're primarily interested in fantasy and adventures, do you ever see yourself writing a contemporary novel, particularly in Kentucky, since that's where you're from? And just an added note, everything you were talking about as your like past stories, I want you to write middle grade. Hannah has said this so many times, but do it, Wendy. That's your market. That's where you need to go. Please.
Yeah, I definitely want to write middle grade. And after I get like this current one published and everything, and I'm kind of established, I want to go back to all of those 8 others and work on getting those published too, which requires a lot of rewriting for some of those. But that first series especially would be published under middle grade. So I'm excited to go back into that world too. So yes to middle grade for sure. And also yes to contemporary. I love reading contemporary in general. And I also do like writing it, even though I do tend towards action adventure, I guess. But yes, absolutely writing a contemporary novel in the future, particularly like a rom-com. And actually like for the Once Upon a Book Club short story that I wrote. Finding it, hold on. Let me see. Well, I'll hold this up. Okay. For the Once Upon a Book Club short story I wrote, that was a contemporary short story as well, a romance. So that was really fun to do that. The part about Kentucky, though, I'm actually really weird about that. I think I don't like setting stories or books or anything places where I've lived. I don't know if I'm afraid of like being stereotypical with that, or afraid of getting things wrong, but I tend to just like pick random places around the world and set my books there. I actually have a map somewhere in some box from my house in high school and middle school where I would mark the places that I set stories and books and things like that. And then when I needed another setting or the characters to travel somewhere, I would like go to that map and be like, okay, where haven't I set something yet? And then pick that, and that's where it would be set. But yeah, I don't know that I'll ever write anything set in Arizona or Kentucky. I'd be more likely to set like a contemporary novel or anything somewhere I've traveled to, or things like that, because I also love like the research process with that too, and just kind of getting to immerse myself in places I'm not familiar with. But yeah, I think I'm weird that way, as in not setting stuff where I've lived.
I could definitely see you writing just a killer rom-com. In fact, I'm going to hold you to that, Wendy. So you mentioned that you queried novels as a teenager, which is a big accomplishment. What insights did you take away from that experience? And knowing more about publishing as an adult, what advice would you give to, 15-year-old you, 16-year-old you about the querying process, about publishing in general, anything like that?
Yeah. So when I queried at 15 and at 16. And I think I did a little at 17 as well. But I got like over 200 rejections from that. So I definitely learned not to be upset with rejections, and that that's all part of the process. And the key word for that was subjectivity. Everything is subjective in publishing. Probably about 80% or more of my rejection letters say, don't be alarmed or don't be upset. This is a subjective industry, which I got so tired of reading. But it's true. It very much is a subjective industry. So I learned like to not be upset with rejections, to just keep going and be persistent with it all. I also learned I'm not a terrible writer through the process, because I did get some positive responses as well. I had people, agents say, request more, request the full manuscript, or request 50 pages of the manuscript. So that was definitely encouraging and made me realize like, yes, I can do this. I can write and I can query, and I'll get published one day. So I did learn those. I guess those were insights. And also that it's not too confusing. It can look really overwhelming and confusing to go into querying, but it's not too horrible as long as you research the heck out of it. I have files like everywhere, especially when I'm going to go back and query even more. But I just have all these research documents that I did, and just finding all these things, and spent a lot of time online trying to figure out what I was doing, since really it was just me at my computer trying to figure it all out. I didn't really have anybody to like look up to for that. My parents are both writers, but they haven't ever queried or anything like that, so I couldn't really go to them for that. So it was just me researching it all. But I did it, and anybody can do it as long as you just find websites. There's lots of help online for that. So yeah, those are some insights. And then I guess advice for myself at that time would really just be keep going, be persistent, just keep trying. And even though I haven't found an agent yet, because I haven't queried since I was 17, but I'm going to start again in the fall. I know that like I'm on the right path to do it. So I would tell myself like, just do exactly what you did. Like keep doing this, because it'll get you there one day, I'm sure. So yeah, I think that would just be just persistence.
I love that. So referring back to your parents, and as you've mentioned frequently in the past, you are named after Wendy Darling and you love Peter Pan. So I'm interested to know how your parents' interest in storytelling has helped you in shaping your authorial voice.
Yeah, yeah. First, I do want to say, like, I recognize there are absolutely problematic elements in Peter Pan, and that I'm really interested in how that continues to like develop and change as more and more people write about it and things like that. So those are things. There are things I do not like about the story. But what I do love about the story is mostly like the spotlight on imagination and on not growing up and being a child. I actually wrote a whole speech about it for original oratory and speech, I think my senior year of high school. That was just all about like how we shouldn't grow up. We shouldn't lose that part of ourselves that's just so open to wonder and things like that. So those are things that I do love about the story. But yeah, as far as storytelling goes, yeah, my parents are both writers, not like the same way that I am. They write different styles, different genres, and things like that. My dad's a nature writer, but they did read to me and told me stories since before I was born, when I was still like in my mom's stomach. Like they told me stories all the time. So I grew up with a healthy or overactive imagination due to that. So that definitely influenced my authorial voice. But then, like as far as storytelling goes, when my dad would tell me bedtime stories, he would have me like help create them with him, and so I'd always throw in pirates and adventure and all those kinds of things into the story. And then when my mom would tell me stories, she would usually try to get me to go to sleep with the stories, so she'd like purposefully try to make them boring. But I would beg her to tell me the like this one story that she'd have. I would beg her to tell me the story from each character's perspective in it, and she would. And I don't know if that was me or her that originally started that, but that definitely lends itself to my current love of playing with perspective and just telling stories from like all the perspectives and seeing what every character thinks. So I think that definitely influenced that. And just being in a household full of books was also really important to that. There are always books around me, so I always had access to read and to all these different worlds and stories. So I think that all of those together really helped form that authorial voice.
I love that. And I'm really curious what your answer is going to be to this next question. What's your writing routine like? Having now written almost 10 novels, which is insane, how do you keep yourself motivated during the drafting process?
So there is a difference between my writing of the first eight versus my writing of Stealing Time because of like where I was in life. Like once I started AP classes junior year and then college, it was a whole lot harder for me to just dedicate time to writing. So for the first eight, I wrote all the time. I had a binder, like I showed you, and I would just hand write in that binder and take that binder with me everywhere. So it really became like a staple of like, oh, is Wendy at this event? Yep, she is, and yep, she has a binder with her. Because I would write everywhere. I write at football games. I think I wrote at like the circus once. I just write everywhere. So, and I still do if I have my laptop with me or even my phone. I'll write in my notes app a lot. But yeah, so that really was kind of my writing routine. I didn't really have just like a routine of like I'm writing at this time at like for those eight books, because it just was everywhere. But for Stealing Time, because I was in college while I was writing that one, I started it freshman year. I would write when I had time. I'd write in class if I was bored because it looked like I was taking notes. So I would do that. But I didn't write as much. So it did take me a lot longer to finish it because of that. Like I said, like 3 years versus an average of 9 months. And I'm hoping that now that time should kind of go down as I dedicate more and more time to writing in the future. But once Stealing Time became my thesis, I had a deadline for it. So I definitely had to kind of like come up with a routine at that point. So this semester specifically, I was trying to write 500 words each weekday, and then take breaks on the weekends. And that mostly succeeded, but I did get off. We were out of town for a week and had trouble with the internet. My program accidentally like uploaded itself to the cloud and we didn't have internet. So I was like, great, now I can't write. But so I got a little behind on my goal. So then I had to like up that to 1,000 words a day. And that's really what helped me finish it about a week ago. So, but as far as like a routine goes, I would usually write like first thing in the morning or like at night right before I went to bed. Every now and then in the afternoon, especially if it was nice outside, I'd like go outside and write out there. But I didn't have quite as much a routine as I wanted to. And I definitely want to, like in the future, really establish like a certain routine. Like this is the time that I'm writing. This is what really works for me. Um, Usually it seems to be like if other people in my house are asleep, that's better because I can kind of like focus more. But or if I just like shut myself in my room, then that works. But yeah, it's not like a full-fledged routine. And then as far as what keeps me motivated, really it's like my love of writing and my excitement for the story is kind of what keeps me motivated. Also like planning as well, because if I really know where I'm going with something, then I'm excited to get there, so then I'll write it. But also deadlines, that also helps keep me motivated too, and probably will for the future as well when I'm officially on deadlines for like turning in drafts and things like that. But yeah, mostly it's just like I just love doing it, so I do it for the most part.
So you said that you don't like setting your stories where you've lived. So I'm wondering if any of your characters are inspired by your your interests or your personalities or experiences. And which of your characters would you say is most like you, if at all?
Yes, they are. If you kind of take all of my characters and combine them, you'll get me. So my interests and experiences definitely find their way into my books. Pretty much all of my characters, like my protagonists, they usually have a love of writing. So whether that's like reporting or something like that, writing books. I think I had one character writing a book at one point. I might have taken that out in a later draft, but that was there. They all love books in general and reading, so that's definitely part of me that kind of goes into all the characters. Um, but on other things like that, on like experiences I've had, it finds its way there, but usually fairly subtly. So you kind of have to know me pretty well to like read a book and be like, oh yeah, this was what happened to Wendy at this one experience or something like that. But yes, definitely. Lots of things in my life find their way into my books. People find their way into my books too, usually not on purpose. I'll just kind of read it one day and be like, oh, this person kind of has a personality trait like this person. But yeah, although when I was younger, like when I first started out, people wanted to be in my books. And so I would write them in. So the first series, there's like a friend group there that's literally my friend group from that time. And I can pick out exactly who was each person. And I've kept track of that all. And then other people would come up to me and be like, hey, I want to be in your book. And I would hand them the list of characters and be like, pick somebody here. These are the ones that are taken. So those people are still there. Usually their personalities didn't get added on if someone was already established. But maybe they'll remember that someday when those are published and be like, oh, yeah, that was me. But yeah, for the most part, things are pretty subtle. But yeah, and the character wise, it's often in like my female protagonists. Usually the male protagonists kind of have their own distinct personalities because I'm female, so I tend to relate a little bit more to the girls. But they do have their like own very distinct personalities as well. They all start with different traits that I have, but they become their own persons and they grow and they change throughout the book as well. So even that first one that I started basing off of that boy who sat in front of me in class, the character by the fifth book was so different than the actual boy. It was very interesting to like watch him change over the course of the series and then be like, wow, they're nothing like now other than sharing a name. So that was definitely interesting to watch that as well. And because I was like different ages throughout too, it was interesting to like see how like my 10-year-old character Judy from the Chronicles of Power is a lot like I was at 10 or at 12. She's probably the most, I would say, based on me or like me, younger me, because I was less experienced at that point. So I was really basing her more on me. But yeah, she was definitely like 10-year-old me. And then as I got older, some of them were more and more like me. But basically, if you combine Judy, Maggie, Paige, and Lucy, you'll get me. So kind of all of them together.
Please write me in 20-year books, Wendy, but make me a villain. I
Ooh,
want to wreak havoc on people, please.
okay.
Anyways, so Paths to Publishing has been such a fun project to do with you. I've loved hearing from industry professionals about all the different ways, people can break into publishing and all that. What are some of the most valuable pieces of advice you've received from this interview series? And do you have any favorite moments? Just a little trip down memory lane as we wrap up.
Yeah, so I have troubles remembering all of them. So I frantically was going back to try and watch them before this. But Tirza Price, her advice was don't be afraid to ask questions. And that really resonated with me because I always ask questions in everything, in class, whatever. I'm always asking questions. So I feel like that's like giving myself permission to not know things, to go into publishing, the point at which I finally have an agent and I'm going on that process and on that journey, and giving myself permission to just ask questions and not know is going to be really helpful. And I'm sure I will do it too, because I don't think I could not ask questions. So that advice was really helpful for me. And then also she mentioned that she had attended the Vermont College of Fine Arts to get her master's degree in writing for children and young adults. And up until that point, I'd never really considered going to grad school. I thought you had to teach if you go to grad school, and I don't want to teach at all. So I wasn't sure about it. But then when she mentioned this program that's specifically for children and young adults, that really resonated with me. So I've started researching after that, and now I'm maybe considering grad school. We'll see what happens. But so that was, I guess, advice or unwitting advice from Tirza. So thank you for that, Tirza. But as far as like favorite moments, I absolutely loved the interview with Paige Turlip. It was so fun. I felt like I could talk to her like all day. And I learned so much from her about the job of a literary agent and like what that entails, all these things that I had questions about, but had never really like looked up before or really had a chance to ask. So that was really fun. The interview with Miranda Paul, when she was giving us all those book racks at the end, that was really fun too. Just like seeing all the books that she had enjoyed and had inspired her during the pandemic. I don't know, just all of them. They're all so much fun. And I absolutely loved my experience doing it all and doing it with you, Hannah. So thank you for everything that you did with it as well.
I personally really loved watching you guys like work together because you guys are a dynamic duo. And I can't wait to like see what you guys do in the future. So as Hannah mentioned, the Path to Publishing series was a wonderful opportunity for you both. So what do you think your experiences with Pine Reads has helped you with, and where do you see yourself in the book world, if at all, apart from being an author? And do you see yourself being more involved with the reader community, or are you hoping to be a more private author?
Yeah, so I think Pine Reads has really helped me, especially with like getting immersed in the kidlit world. I was before, but by working with Pine Reads, I'm very like on top of like what's coming out, like what are what are books that are coming out a year from now, that kind of thing. Just being really into it, excited for all of those as well, and just really reading a lot. And so hopefully that'll help with my hopeful future in children's publishing. And then as far as apart from being an author, I might end up working as a literary agent or at a publishing house, something like that. Maybe an editorial or like copy editing or things like that. We'll see. Kind of depends on what happens with internships and things like that. So a lot's up in the air, but that would definitely be fun. and be something that I think I would enjoy doing. But with that being said, my dream job is to be a full-time fiction author. So if my career with like writing takes off first, then I'm following that through, and I'll probably just go straight into that, and just write full-time. If that would be the dream, that would be amazing if that happened. But it would be fun to work like in the children's publishing world as well. And as far as interacting with readers, I think I'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't think I'll interact a whole lot, but as a reader, I always love when authors interact with me. I get so excited by it. I like screenshot if authors like my tweets and stuff. But I am a very private person in general. Like as far as my social media now, even though I don't have thousands of followers or anything, I'm just pretty private. So I don't think I'll be posting much about my personal life. That could always change, especially if I get like more confident or things like that. But I do definitely want to interact with readers and to give readers like the experiences that I've had with some of my favorite authors as well. So somewhere in the middle with that.
I love that. And so this is my final question for you. I know Jackie has a couple more for you, but on a fun note, and I'm sure you have like 100 answers to this question, but if you had to pick like your top authors, as an aspiring author yourself, which stories and authors have inspired you along the way?
Yeah, there are a lot. So the number one is Rick Riordan. His books were really the ones that just kind of got to me and made me see like, oh, I can do this. And even if you look back at like my original kind of writing style, it's very similar to his. Like I sometimes would do chapter titles that were really fun and things like that, which just goes back to like what he does with his writing. So definitely Rick Riordan, but also like female authors who write kick butt women. There are lots of them out there, so I definitely am not going to be able to name them all, but that's really helped inspire me and show me like, yeah, I can do this too. I can write kick butt women in my own writing and things like that. And then the 39 Clues is also one. That series is slightly under Percy Jackson for my favorite, but definitely like right up there as one of my favorite series. And that one really showed me like you can have books that traverse the world that just take place in all these different settings, and it's fun to learn about those places through the books and just really discover the world that way, which is probably why some of my books kind of are globe-trotting adventures as well. But yeah, I don't know, as far as specific ones, probably like Marie Lu and Legend is a big one, Alexandra Bracken and Passenger, Jennifer Nielsen and the Ascendant series. I'm looking at my shelf. Just lots of books and series. Suzanne Collins and the Hunger Games, I guess. There's so many. So I'm not gonna be able to name them all, but lots of books have inspired me. Mostly like action adventure books, but historical fiction, romance, lots of genres too. Pretty much anything I read though inspires me, especially if I love it, because I grow as an author and as a reader for every book I read.
So speaking of stories that inspire you, this is actually my favorite question to ask anybody. But if you could choose one IP to write for, what would it be and why?
So I have a distinct memory of me being in middle school and telling a friend, I think we were in the gym for like PE or something for some reason. And I was having a conversation with a friend. And I remember telling them, like, one day maybe I'll be writing a book in the 39 Clues series. So that definitely would have been a fun IP to write for at the time. I mean, now I don't even know what's happening with it. They were on like series 5 when I stopped reading. So I don't know if that's still going. Maybe it is. Maybe I'll write for that one day. But I think now probably the A Twisted Tale series, because I just love fairy tale retellings. So that would be really fun to write for and to like pick one of those stories to retell, or even to retell like Peter Pan or something like that. I have all these ideas now for like books I want to write, but also maybe like a middle grade one, because I know there are lots of series, at least when I was in like late middle school, early high school, that were coming out that had like that had multiple authors with them. Like there's the Amulet something or other series, Voyagers, Spirit Animals, Infinity Ring, all those ones. So the next like middle grade series like that would be really fun to write for too. And also anthologies. I'd love to write more anthologies.
I feel like you need to have that for full circle moment of writing a Peter Pan retelling.
Yeah.
Just do it, Wendy, just please. So my last question is, can you tell us a bit about your work in progress and what are a few comp titles for it?
Yeah. So it's a whole mix of genres, but it's young adult action venture. And then it has elements of historical fiction, science fiction, magical realism, romance, some fantasy, although that goes more to like the magical realism, but like all of those genres combined. And then the little summary that I took from my query letter draft, I guess, is trapped aboard a time traveling ship, two stubborn 17-year-olds from London, 1860, must put aside their differences and learn how to work together to escape and find their freedom from those who like to control their past, present, and future. So it centers around Lucy Stewart, who is an upper class girl who can travel people and objects through time and space, and Kai, who is a street thief, and he can move things with his mind. And it's basically like what happens when they get on this time traveling ship, time traveling because of Lucy. What happens when they meet? How can they escape? What happens when they interact with these other kids that are on the ship as well? And then things just kind of snowball. So that's the basic premise. And then as far as comp titles, I sat here working on this for a long time today, trying to figure it out. But Passenger by Alexandra Bracken is definitely a comp title and the only solid one that I have at this point. But Seafire is maybe a comp title. I haven't read it yet, so we'll see, but that could be one. And then I like did a whole recipe thing for it. So if you combine Sage from the Ascendant series with Day from Legend, then combine Lizzie Bennett from Pride and Premeditation with Annabeth Chase from Percy Jackson and put them in the world of Passenger, that's kind of stealing time. So basically all of that together. But yeah, comp titles I'm still figuring out, sort of. So I'll definitely need to know those soon when I query. But yeah, that's kind of the basic idea that I have for it right now. And it'll be exciting to see like where it goes from here, where it goes from its like first draft that I finished now and how it changes until it's published.
Let's bring time travel back. I want to, we've spent enough time without time travel books in children's literature. At least, honestly, if anybody's watching and they know of any recent time traveling books, send them my way. But that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. I love going back and like reading the different parts of it, which I do with all of my books as well. Just like go back and reread different scenes. Like if I'm in the mood for romance, then I'll go back and read my favorite kiss scene, or I'll go back and read my favorite action scene, or things like that. But yeah, we'll see. Hopefully soon. Hopefully in like 2 years or something, it'll be published.
Manifesting. You're gonna do it. I believe in you.
It's going to happen. And then you're going to send personalized signed copies to both Jackie and myself.
Oh my God.
We will pay for them.
Wendy.
We will pay for them.
Yes.
Hire me.
Yeah. I love that.
That would be awesome.
Oh my God. We're like a trio. Design, writer, agency. We will take over the book world.
I love
Let's
it.
do it.
World domination. I told you guys, Wendy's going to write me as a villain, and I'm going to, like, my ultimate goal is world domination, and you guys are going to be there with me. I love that, Wendy. Thank you so much for talking with us about your writing journey and what you're working on right now, and just everything. It's been really fun to do this series with you and to get a chance to chat with you about everything. So is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I mean, thank you for doing it. I love talking about my writing. I could talk about my writing for like hours if people would let me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to.